Thank you, everybody, for joining this call here today or webinar. We are here to talk about Profit 21 Wireless Warehouse Management System Optimization. So if you don't know what WWMS is, we're off to a bad start, but Wireless Warehouse is what we're focused on here today. This isn't going to be a product tour. We work with P21 customers every day, and people who have P21 wireless system, people who don't, people who have bought it, who have somewhat implemented it, people who have bought it and it's sitting on a shelf somewhere. And what we constantly see is a gap between what's actually the system is capable of and how it's being used in businesses. And most often that's not first and foremost a training problem or even a software problem. It's actually a configuration and setup problem. So we really want this to be a practical working session for you today to give you some lenses and insights into what's possible with the system. A couple of logistics. You should be able to message questions in the chat session, and we will be able to see those as we go. And we'll attempt to answer Q&A towards the end of this webinar. And if I see something while Matt's presenting that's really relevant to that point in time, I'll pause and ask Matt that question. We want to make this as much of a discussion and interactive as we can. And there will be a recording available. So recordings that will go out post the event. And everybody is automatically muted. I don't believe anybody can unmute themselves. If you put your hand up and you have a verbal question, I believe I can unmute you as a host, but you shouldn't be able to unmute yourself, I believe is the answer to that question, Chris. So before we go any further, let me make a couple of introductions. Many of you, as I talked about, I know. Many of you, I don't. And so let's get going here with some quick introductions. So my name is Andrew Taylor. I'm the co-founder here at Conveyance Solutions. We are a technology partner to industrial distributors across the United States with a particular focus on Epicor's Profit 21, for whom we are a Platinum Elite partner for Epicor. And increasingly, we're also doing AI and automation work for our distribution customers, as many people are wrestling with how to thrive in the AI space. In addition, with me today is Matthew Lucas. He's our senior application consultant and our warehouse guru. Matt has been to more warehouses all over North America in good, bad, and ugly locations, and has seen just about everything you can with both warehouse operations and more specifically how best to use P21 in those environments to get the best out of that system. So Matt's going to walk us through some really practical tools and guidelines here today. In terms of a very, very brief agenda for the day, we're going to talk about pain, warehouse pain in particular, and some of the common patterns of pain that we see around North America. We're going to talk about solutions in really practical terms. Matt's going to share some screenshots of some practical solutions to those pain points. We're going to talk about why management matters and what a true balanced scorecard really looks like. Give you a brief introduction to a case study that we think really reflects some of the themes that we've talked about earlier. Give you a diagnostic that you can score yourself against real time today to give you a sense of where there might be opportunity in your business. And we'll wrap up with a key giveaway. We are giving away a free something or other. That's all I'm going to leave it as today. And we'll give that away towards the end of the webinar. And as I said, we'll make time for Q&A as we go through both through the webinar where I see it appropriate and definitely towards the end. So with that, Matt, why don't you introduce us to some of those common pain points that you see across warehouses?
Absolutely. So the first one I usually see, and I know this is a major one for almost everybody, is inventory that nobody can fully trust. You go to a bin location, you're expecting to see item A, and there's supposed to be 100 of them. You go there's only 60 of them. You know, there's items in there that are not supposed to belong, And it's always like the biggest pain point that I see because it slows down everything. It slows getting out orders to your customers. It's hard to do counts. It's hard to keep to manage. Should we order more of this item because we don't know where it's at? So definitely the number one pain point. The second one is too much movement, not enough throughput. What I mean by this is how often do you see your workers travel in the warehouse? They're going from one end of the warehouse to get one item, coming back up to the other end, pick another item. So there's just so much movement and downtime of just traveling throughout the warehouses. Number three, it's a system of record, not a system of direction. So what we mean by this is your user are inputting what they think should be the best solution as far as this item should go in this bin location, or I don't really want to pick it from this. I want to pick it from over here. So there's a lot of opportunity to switch that to where the system is given the direction. It's going to give you the best available solution to where to put items, where to store them, and how to keep them together. Next one is supervisors managed by field rather than data. If you're currently using WMS, you might not have a way to track what everybody's doing. How many items am I picking? How many lines am I picking? How long is it taking me? What are the statuses of an order? Can I see if it's being picked? If is it staged? Is it ready to invoice? So there's a lot of data that you can use to help manage, but you don't know where to find it. The last one is system makes working clunky and friction filled. How many times do you have a new person? You can't just hand them a device and say, "Here, I need you to go pick." You have to kind of walk them through the screens. You got to say, "Oh, well, it's going to go from here to here," and then you need to look at this. So it makes it less intuitive for the user when there's so much information that it bogs them down.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt. I'm pretty sure people on this call have already identified at least with one of those five and probably more. It's such a common experience. It's shared pain throughout the distribution business in these areas. So as we move to solutions, Matt's going to do some deep dives here. Um, each of these levers exists in your system right now. You will see some customization today, but it is customization done with the likes of simple dial change screens designs, perhaps a portal, perhaps a report. There is nothing. There is no third-party modules here. There's nothing out of the box, completely ordinary that you probably don't have existing in your system today. So I don't want you to come away from this webinar today and go, oh, wow, there's like a whole thing I've got to go and do. A lot of this is we're putting stuff on the lowest shelf for you to be able to see what's possible in the system and the really significant financial investment you've made already in your system today. These levers exist today. So Matt, why don't you walk us through the first one, which I think speaks to that first pain point.
Absolutely. First pain point we talked about is operators deciding where the inventory to go. Inconsistency, items spread out throughout the warehouse, not together. So we're going to deep dive into this one first. So what we see here is this is your base put away screen. We can see it says bin anywhere. This basically is just going to tell the user, all right, go find a location and put it in there. It might not be where you usually store that particular item, or it might either be items there. So it's given that capability to the user for them to make that decision versus the system help direct them.
And Matt, this is the put away and receiving screens, Matt. Is that what you're talking about here?
Correct. So both receiving and group put away will give you the option of anywhere if the system is not set up correctly. And that is just as simple as building a put away attribute and assigning it to your put away zones. So what you see here is that same screen, like Andrew mentioned, it's just some data changes. I always like to clean them up. I like to reorganize so that we're always working from top to bottom. You can see that I center all of the actual data fields. Reason being is on a handheld device, if I'm clicked in that confirm item box, there's a blinking line. But if I don't center it, it's off to the left, and I'm never going to see that on a little handheld device. So moving it over, it'll help line that up, and it helps clean things up. You'll see there's a button at the bottom that says bin lookup. This is just one of those small little business rule pieces that we can add in that'll really benefit you. So on the next image, we're going to
Matt,
have.
before we go to that next image, Matt, so we've moved from bin any. I get the dynamo change down the bottom, but we've moved from bin anywhere to specified bin. Is that a change there, Matt? That's also happening in the system.
Yeah, so that is just us setting up that put away attribute. Basically, you can think of an attribute as a classification of the item. And you basically are telling it, like, I want to keep alike items together. So what it's doing is it's actually pulling in where that item is actually at right now and going to suggest that bin. Or if you have primary bin set up, it will go ahead and tell you the primary bin just right there in the screen. So this is just a simple setup. This next image you can see here. So it is the same item that we see on the left-hand side where it says each at 432. Maybe you don't put away at eaches, but that's how you have to order. So all this is a very simplistic business rule that when they go to scan that item and it pulls that item in, it's going to convert it to what you actually put away as. So instead of having to do math and saying, yeah, I think 432 inches or 84 cases, let the system do the work. It just makes it a lot easier, and your inventory is going to be a lot more accurate with it. What you see here is this is that bin lookup button. So one of the big complaints that I hear a lot of times is having to manage multiple screens on a device. We're talking a device the size of a cell phone, so having to switch screens. So what you see here is when you click that bin lookup button, you can see it's going to pull in the item, and it's going to actually give me all of the current bins, what the quantity is. If you want to have it set to where you want to be able to fill it up, we can see there. We can see how many cases or eaches does it require to be full. And then once the bin's full, it's giving you a checkbox to say, hey, don't even go to these bins because they're already full. So you're not over forcing the system to put something somewhere that you don't want it to be.
Great. That's probably the most sophisticated piece of customization that you'll see here, Matt, I think is through the whole course of this is this sort of bin lookup piece of functionality. That's probably the most custom thing I think we might see, Matt.
Absolutely. So what changes? We're going to let the system do the put away. It's going to give us where things need to go. Using the group put away, the bin lookup, it gives us better visibility to where items are, where I should put items. Instead of just finding a location saying, that this looks good, I'll put it here. And again, the system decides every time. So it doesn't matter if you have a veteran person putting away or you have a new person that you just hired in. It's going to give them the same information to where everybody's going to be able to complete the task the same way. So the next problem we're looking at is warehouse is sequenced, but and the inventory is just moving around. So we're going to look at an unoptimized warehouse. So granted, this is a little bit extreme on this, but if your system is not set up correctly, and what I'm talking about is you have a couple of different sequences and zones in your bin setups. The system, if everything is set to the same sequence, it's going to run alphabetical order. So if the left aisle is A and the right aisle is B, I'm going to have to travel all the way down that aisle and come all the way back up to the beginning to go down the B aisle. Or if your numbers aren't out, you might be backtracking from A to all the way down to D and then back to C. Or the worst case scenario, if your bins go all the way up to an AA, which might be down at the other end of the warehouse, you're going to pick A, then you got to go pick AA down at the other end because technically it's alphabetical, and then come back. So it's just you're just sporadically moving throughout the warehouse.
It is a good exercise routine, Matt. If your exercise was important, this would be good.
You'll definitely get your steps in for sure. So what you see here is just a simple bin mapping. So when we go to sequence, there's a couple of things here to point out. One is the pick path. So in this case, there's enough room to travel one way down the aisles. We're going to reduce backtracking. We're going to reduce pickers going in the wrong direction and you getting a collision down the middle of an aisle. But we're also going to be able to serpentine these as we're making our way through. A lot of times we have set it up is left, right, right, left. That way you're just going straight down and you never have to backtrack. The other piece that I'll point out is zones. So in this case, I technically have two different zones based off of areas of the warehouse. So we have our main area out in the main, and you have this little piece over on the right-hand side that maybe has to always use a fork truck no matter what. So we can separate those out so you're not having to go from saying picking with a cart in your main warehouse to having to go get on a fork truck, go pick what you need with the fork truck, get back off and go finish. That also goes even throughout the main warehouse. I have some of these color coded to where it kind of shows you the height of those bins. So like the gray ones go up 5 levels. So we can actually separate the zones even in your main warehouse to where, let's say you only use cart and you use a fork truck. We can have it set to where I will be able to make that full path just on a cart without having to go get a fork truck in the middle, and then I can wait and pick the fork truck stuff later all at one time. So you gain a lot of extra um, modification to your warehouse just by using some of those zoning as well. And then what do we end up with? We end up with a sequenced warehouse that makes it easy to flow. It makes you know where everybody's going to be traveling. So we can see this is just serpentining down the warehouse. And then once it gets done with this, if we want to, we can see some bins across the back. We can actually sequence those in so you can pick those up as you're moving around through the back of the warehouse and coming back up the next aisle. So again, you never have to backtrack. It's just a one-way flow through the warehouse.
Excellent, Matt. And so is that, talk briefly to how you would set up zoning, the practical mechanism in P21 for setting up zoning, if you will.
So the way I always try to explain being able to set those zones is it's either you want to do it based on physical buildings. So maybe you have 3 buildings in your warehouse. I would set those up separately because it's you might have to go through a door to get over somewhere else, or maybe you have a yard out that you want to have something separated, or you do it by the type of equipment used. So let's say again, a cart, a fork truck, or maybe you have a wire cutting facility that you need to go cut wire. We can separate those out to where when a time comes for a pick ticket, anything that would require a wire cut, it's going to be
Mm,
handled only to them. So you don't have to worry about, oh, I need to print a separate pick ticket and take it over so they can do it. Let the system do it for you.
great. And we're going to see that a little later on here when we talk about Wireless Workbench. Okay. So,
So again, just fixing warehouse layouts. So what are we changing? We're going to sequence the bins. We're going to assign zones for the right equipment or for the right warehouse. And what's going to happen? We're going to have fewer steps, less backtracking with the same amount of people.
exactly right. Okay. Scan management, Matt.
So with this problem we talked about is a lot to do with the devices themselves. I'm trying to rush through because it's so many different options on the screen that I'm trying to get through. I'm cutting corners to get through it. So in this case here, we can say that on the left-hand side, we're going to receive everything into a singular receiving bin. What's the problem with that? If you look to the right, we now have multitude of items, multitude of quantities that are now within this bin at one time. And it's really hard to find out, okay, which shipment did that come from? Who received that? You know, can I move them all at one time? It makes it a lot harder for you to go back and to track down any issues. So my suggestion always is to use a cone, use an LP. If you want to use a placard, use a placard. But what we do is we break up those receiving. So if I'm receiving a pallet in, I can receive all that to a singular cone or a bin, and then the next pallet, I do the same thing. And so by doing so, I can see down here on the right-hand side, on this shipment, I can see exactly what quantity was received to which cone to where, let's say at that very bottom one for 368, all of a sudden I go, oh, wait, I don't have that many. I can go, oh, I can see which cone it is. Let me go double check that. Or maybe it was supposed to be on that first item. We know it's 48, but I typed in 480. Well, now I can go, oh, I need to go double check that cone, and I know exactly where I'm going to look versus having to look through everything at one time. So what are we going to change? It's as simple as instead of receiving to a master bin or a receiving bin, we're just going to receive it to a cone or an LP. It makes it a lot easier to keep track of. And then even when if you want to go do put away, now you have a singular bin that you know what you're taking out of. You're not worried about, oh, is somebody going to pull everything out of an entire receiving bin at one time, and then they're running around with everything that some people else can't come and help with.
Matt, can you for the dummies in the room, and I'm putting myself in that category right now. Can you explain a license plate that goes on the back of a vehicle? What the heck is a license plate, man?
So a license plate is just a way to identify a movable bin or a pallet. So like I said, it can be a cone, it can be a placard. It's a movable bin. So it can be whatever you want to designate it as. I've seen just about every possible solution for it. Um, but yeah, it's just something where you say, okay, these items are now a part of this temporary bin that even if I want to go back and look later on, I can go, oh, I have four of these that are not in a regular bin. Oh, they're over here in this temporary bin that just haven't been put up yet. So it gives you just that extra
Um,
visibility.
Got it. So a license plate, it's a movable thing, like a license plate on a vehicle, and it identifies it. That has just put all that together for me, and I have seen that term multiple times. Thank you, Matt. I've learned something from this webinar today. All right, moving on.
All right. Next, supervisors has to walk the floor to know what's happening. I know probably everybody on the call has experienced this one way or another. So, solution during picking. This is called a workbench. So it's a standard feature in P21. We can see, in this case, it's on our bench. You can set up workbenches if you want to have just any shipments going out of it, or if you want transfers to go into a single workbench, or you want bin replenishments to go in a workbench. We can set it up to where you can have it multiple workbenches, or you can have a single workbench. Maybe you want all FedEx orders to go and be able to pick all together. That's completely optional. But what it does is it takes the accumulation of all those orders, and I will say is as soon as a pick ticket number is generated, it will come into the workbench. You don't have to wait for that printer to actually print something out. So I know there's times where, oh, printer runs out of paper. Well, now no one catches it and you're 30 minutes without picking anything. It doesn't matter. As soon as that pick ticket number is generated, it's going to be in this workbench. What you see at the top is you can see unassigned and picker group. This is where I like to see the workbench a little bit different. I use what's called the picker groups. You see it here. Think of this as a bucket of users that you can assign to that group. And then whenever I'm ready to assign orders, I drop orders on that picker group. And then when they go active, which we can see here, the status says active, the systems are going to automatically assign it to them. So as soon as I log into that workbench, I'm off picking. As soon as I finish, it's going to give me the next one. Or let's say that I'm picking a large order and I need to go to lunch. I can deposit what I've picked so far. It drops back into that picker group. So now when Andrew comes in after me, it'll assign to him to go finish it. So it's just a nice, easy function where it's a constant flow of tickets. You're not worried about people coming back over to a desk saying, hey, I'm out of stuff. I need a ticket. Hey, or you don't have to track somebody down to say I need something to be picked.
And Matt and I talked about this previously. The wireless workbench is one of the things that we see the least when we walk in the door. Is that fair, Matt? Pre-installed
Absolutely.
or pre-set up.
Yep, pre-setup. It's just not really used that often. One thing I do want to go into is down at the bottom. These are where all the tickets are. You can see a pick ticket. You can see the zone. So again, if you had, let's say, a wire cutting area and you have that zoned out, you actually be able to see, oh, I need to go pick 5 items from the main warehouse and I've got 3 wires that need to be cut. It gives you that quick visibility of what's going on. You can see the customer name. There's many, many fields that go out to the right. It's very simple to move those around and to come back to. What we see here, this is the picker group. So you heard me talk about I can assign different zones to different users. So we'll say Andrew's not certified on a fork truck. We just
Nope.
don't put the fork truck on him, so that way he only gets main pick tickets. If I have fork truck, I can get main or I can get fork truck. So this can be used to basically take a single pick ticket of, let's say, 50 lines. It can break that up and divide it out to where it can be picked by multiple people. You don't have to print multiple copies. You can let the system divide it up based on those zones and who they're assigned to. Go more into visibility. And again, this is something that I see everywhere. What are my guys doing in the warehouse? So on the one on the top left, this is by a user. I've blacked out the user just so that we didn't have other people's names showing up there, but we can see the date, the minutes that they were picking, the quantity they picked, the lines per minute, the hours. Maybe you say, oh, I'd prefer to see lines per hour. Great. We can add that in it's very quick and easy to do. At the bottom, it's just your overview by day. So you can see every day of the week, what you're picking, how you're doing, and you can see your average. So this way you can see how am I doing against my average for the week. Maybe you can see like right now, oh, this week really averaging a lot. Why? Is it better? Is it different orders? Is it different people working? So you really gain the visibility of what's happening in your warehouse. The next one um, is just an order status. So in the case of this one, they use scan and pack and picking. So we can see, has picking started? Has picking been completed and waiting to be for scan and pack? Has scan and pack started to be able to QC the items? Once it's complete, we know, oh, these are orders are ready to invoice and get out the door. So it's something that only you can use for the warehouse, but I know a lot of times people in the warehouse say, oh, well, sales called me and wants to know where this order's at. What's the status of it? So this gives us that
Mm,
visibility of a quick look to say, okay, where's this at? We also have the
mm.
bin. We know in this case these are shipping cones. We know where it's sitting at the dock. So I can walk right over to that cone and say, oh, this is the order. It's ready to go.
That's great, Matt. Really good.
So what changes? It's just setting up the workbench. Let the workbench do the work for you. It's a tool that is very easy to set up, is very easy to manage, very easy to use, but it gives you that full control of what I need picked. Once it's in there, I don't have to find somebody down to track somebody down. Let the system do the work. And it lets you manage by data, not by instinct.
But I think, Matt, what we often find, right, when we're taking a company from complete paper to, I mean, everything's run on paper, to a digital environment like Wireless Warehouse, sometimes the interim step is a bit more paper focused, but this workbench, true digital functionality, that we're getting close at that point, Matt, to a truly paperless warehouse. Not completely, but that is to me the big step getting away from paper is the wireless workbench.
Absolutely, because you're not having to hand paper out to somebody and wait for that paper to come back to know that, oh, there was an issue or, oh, this is ready to move on to the next step. You're going to remove all that out of there. Now, I will say maybe you're worried, like, oh, I don't know if I want to go completely paperless yet. I don't know if I trust the system. That's fine. Once a workbench is set up, you're going to
Mm,
be getting, you can still have that paper copy in your hand, but you just don't have to give it out. Let it go through the workbench.
mm,
You don't, it's not, oh, we turn it on and hey, it's on, it's good luck. You can even start picking some orders through it. And then once you feel comfortable, oh, now we can get everybody. So it's going to be
yeah,
constantly updating itself while
yeah.
you're running through the paper.
100%. I think, though, the sales of colored folders will decrease significantly if people adopt Wireless Workbench. I'm just saying, man.
100%. And your paper consumption will go down drastically.
Yes. All right. Last problem.
Uh, Too many steps. Manual entry where scan should work. So this just goes back to, I always think about we hire somebody on new. What you see here, this is just your base picking screen. This in P21. There's a lot of blank fields. There's fields that you maybe don't use. Maybe you don't use lots. Maybe you don't use traceable factors. You don't use serial numbers. Why have it on the screen? So with just some simple dyna changes on the next images, we can see here. All I did was just clean them up. There is no customizations. It's just strict dyna changes. You can see how much cleaner and easier it is. So on the first image, I moved the bin up underneath the bin that you have to scan. I shouldn't have to look all the way up the screen and try to go through the fields and say, okay, what bin is it? So what I always do is if you have to scan something, move it up underneath whatever it is you're supposed to be scanning. It makes it that
Mm.
much cleaner and easier to understand.
Yeah. 100%.
And so this is the base put away screen. Again, so many blank fields that somebody has to understand and look through. With just some simple dyna changes and cleaning them up, this is our new image. The other thing to think about too is we're talking about using handheld devices. That the one on top, you're going to have to scroll up and down the screen to see everything. Whereas if you just get a nice clean and just whatever you need on the bottom, it can all fit on a single screen. So really easy to see and really easy to understand. So what are we changing? Um, we're just going to pull it back to whatever they need. Again, if you're not using lots, take it off the screen. If you're not using serials, take it off the screen. It's just less stuff to have to work around, less you have to teach somebody, and then also just put things in order. What
Yeah.
makes the most sense as you're going through to be able to scan? I want to scan this and I want it to drop down to the next box. I scan that, it drops down to the next box.
Yeah, I love this last statement here on this slide. The system earned compliance, right? When we ask people to comply with rules and then and procedures, and then we make it really difficult for them, we're encouraging non-compliance, right? What Matt's really demonstrated here is let's make this as easy for our warehouse people as we possibly can to be as compliant with the system as we need them to be, rather than, to Matt's point, having to scroll up and down a little screen. Maybe they've got gloves on, and we make it as difficult. Instead, we're making it as easy as we possibly can for them. So I think it's really important to say any one of those levers, if I think about it out loud, can be implemented separately from the others. They're not interconnected. That all of the things that you just saw must all be implemented. And I think that's one of the big takeaways I want you to take away from this webinar, is don't get overwhelmed, go, oh gosh, I've got to do all of this. All of those things, I think, as if I recall correctly, can be done in some measure. You can clean up a screen and not have to do anything other than just clean up the screen. But when they start to roll together, we get a really consolidated effect. And Matt's going to talk about a case study here in a few moments where we saw that in play in a real life warehouse. Before we do that, I want to talk about the management challenge. And I think in my experience, and I tend to work a little more with the executive management team in partnership with Matt, working with the warehouse team, is that management often, I'm speaking to managers here, often have a competing scorecard. The stated scorecard that everybody talks about. We want to be accurate. We want to have fill rate. We want to manage our shrinkage. We want on-time dispatch. That's the stated scorecard or something to that nature. You may well have whiteboards. You may have screens in your warehouse that are stating these things. And that's the stated explicit scorecard. The real scorecard that happens when the heat comes on is speed. Get it out fast. The CSR calls from downstairs. It's an important customer. Noise happens in the system. People get under pressure, and we skip a step. We skip a scan. We receive something in really quickly. We don't receive it in properly. We throw it in a bin because we're going to need it this afternoon, and then that doesn't happen, and suddenly the thing is in a bin, but we compromised our system because the real scorecard here is speed. And it's not because our people have some inherent character flaw that they're trying to cheat the system and not comply. It's when what we talk about is the real scorecard is speed, and I get distribution. You're running on thin margins. You've got to get that order out. But when that becomes the only thing and we're willing to compromise everything else, then the way our warehouse people respond is a rational response to that incentive structure. And what I mean by that is, you know what incentives look like by if you went out and talked to your warehouse people, what would get you in trouble around here? And if the answer to that is some combination of speed, getting it out the door, putting a key account at risk because we didn't ship the order, if it's that kind of conversation that somehow comes back to speed, then all the configuration work that we just talked about. Now, we want you to be fast, but that becomes at risk, right? Because a lot of the things Matt talked about was about being more efficient, simplifying screens, being able to get you through scans faster, stop moving paper. All that should lead to speed. But if we will skip a scan step, for example, for the sake of speed, then we put everything at risk. And in my experience, leadership has to be committed to seeing a fully optimized warehouse that's going to take some time over some months where all our key scorecard measures are being successfully achieved versus just the need to get orders out the door. So be really thoughtful as you're thinking about warehouse optimization, that it's not just a conversation about tech. It's also a combination about what are we incentivizing our people around really. And often we incentivize with negatives, which is you get in trouble if an order sits too long on the floor. So to managers out there, think about how you're incentivizing your people. even as you think about the tech here today. So with that, Matt, let's come back to that case study, and maybe you could talk us through what you discovered, what you found, and we're using this. This is an anonymized case study, but it is a real case study. What you found, some of the key things you did, and some of the key changes you noticed with that case study. And then once we're done with that, for those people on the call, we're going to come back, do a quick diagnostic, and then I've got a free giveaway for you at the end of the call. Matt.
Absolutely. So we're working with a medical supply wholesaler here in the U.S., about 350,000 square feet. Uh, it was 75% manual and paper. Uh, Paper was everywhere. It was everything from paper receiving, paper picking, paper QC process. So when we first went, they had no traceability of the inventory from the time it was received to when it was put up, to being picked. They didn't have a pick path logic. They were backtracking back and forth, picking different items. And with that large of a warehouse, it really adds up. When you're talking about having to travel from one end of the warehouse to the other, you're adding a lot of extra time for each of those picks. There was no visibility of what people were doing. They just said, "Oh, I think we had a good day picking today." Now they have metrics, and they didn't trust the inventory. They could not go to the bin and say, "You know what? I know that when I go to pick this order, it's going to be there." So what do we do? It wasn't a magic wand to wave, but we palletized receiving. They started receiving into those pallets, adding a cone to the pallet, so then we knew exactly what items and what quantity was on each pallet. We had the trackability from who received it into that cone, who came and picked up that pallet, who moved it to the warehouse bin, who stored it there. We knew every single time that inventory was touched, who did it, when they did it, why they were doing it. So a lot of the process also around the checking of it. So what they were doing is they're picking with a pick ticket. They were bringing it up, staging multiple pallets with a single pick ticket and just putting it on there. Another team member would come over. They would look at that pick ticket and they would repalletize it based on that pick ticket to say, "Yep, I've got everything." And they would mark it off saying, "Yes, I've got everything here." It would go to another user. They would come back over and do the same thing to double check it. And then they had certain customers that they had to go to a lead. That lead would come over and do the same exact process to check it again. So now we're talking about, multiple times that single piece of paper has gone from the shipping desk to the picker, from the picker to the first checker, to the second checker, and now to a lead to come back to be invoiced. So there was a lot of time from the time that was picked to showing, okay, yeah, we're ready to ship this out. So all we did was we implemented scan and pack to where every time an item was touched in the warehouse, whether it was receiving it, putting it away, picking it, it was all scanned. So when it came to an area to be checked, within the scan and pack screen, they would just scan the items and it would add it to the pallet. So it would tell them, "Hey, this is the wrong item," or "Hey, you have too many or too few." So we just implemented a scan at every single point that an item could ever be touched.
Mm.
What was the outcome? They told us that they had a 3.5 times higher throughput from the time that inventory came in the warehouse to the time it was
Wow.
being shipped. They eliminated their weekend work. They didn't have to play catch up anymore. They used the system visibility. They could see at any point in time, "Oh, where's this order at? Is it getting out the door? Is something ready for scan and pack but not being checked yet? Has it been checked?" So they were able to start trusting the system to get their
Mhm.
data, get an understanding of what's going on in the warehouse, and actually be able to keep track and say, "Hey, Andrew, your pick numbers are super low today. What's going on?" And just start having those conversations and getting a really good
Mhm.
understanding of what's going on in the warehouse.
Yeah, that's amazing, Matt. And I mean, that 3.5 throughput is really, I've looked at that number a few times, to be sure, but that is from the client's mouth. That's really an incredible change. And I think what I would also say about this case study is we had incredible amounts of leadership commitment, right? There was leadership commitment right from the get-go. And it required at times the business to slow down so they could speed up, right? We took time to train, retrain, reconfigure, test. We had to go slow to go fast. and be able to live in that tension and pain. And Matt, I've been on site with you at that client. Like there was tension, right, as we went through this process to go through the change process to realize the outcomes that we talked about. So as we're wrapping up, and I'm conscious of people's time and everybody's busy and they've got warehouses to get back to and P21 help desk tickets to respond to. So quick diagnostic to help summarize today. I want you to give yourself a score of 1 if you agree with this statement, if this is reflective of your environment, and give yourself a 0 if it's not. So when somebody puts away inventory, they often decide where it goes. If that's you, give yourself a score of 1. And not always, maybe it's sometimes the system decides, but if they are often deciding where it goes, being your warehouse people, give yourself a 1. You couldn't trace a pick sequence as a logical sequence path through your warehouse. Going back to that visual of Matt, if you've got people getting in their steps, but not necessarily efficiency in the warehouse, give yourself another 1. Nobody can answer what's the status of a pick ticket without referring to pieces of paper and or folders, which I guess is a piece of paper. But the dreaded folders, if somebody has to go open a folder, flip through a pile of papers to find you the status of a pick ticket, and maybe they're looking for a handwritten note. And then if they can't find that pick ticket and they're going to go out to Jerry in aisle 5, who's picking something else, and maybe he's got the pick ticket on his clipboard, give yourself a 1. There are handoff points where no scan happens and no system record is created. Think of blind spots in your system. Do you have blind spots in your system today where, gotta go find that. Don't know quite where that is. It could be there, it could be there, and you've got to send a person, or you've got to be the person to go find out. Is it there? Is it there? If that's a point in your system and you have those dead spots in your system record, give yourself a 1. Could a new employee rapidly use the scanner without significant instruction? This is a little more ambiguous, but think about how much instruction you have to give to a new person. Oh, well, if you click here, well, then it's going to open this screen over here, and you've got to scroll back here. If you click there, you've got to go back there. If that's the kind of training conversation that you're having with new employees using their scanner, give yourself a 1. And then finally, if the most important informal measure in your warehouse, measures in your warehouse are speed related, and I would put a proviso here, at the cost of all else, everything else dies at the altar of speed, and I would call short-term speed, to put an even finer point on it. If everything revolves around short-term speed of a particular order at the cost of everything else, including long-term efficiency, give yourself a 1. All right. So if you scored a 0 to 1, you are well configured. You could come away from day, pat yourself on the back and say, we have got probably a pretty decently configured wireless warehouse system. Well done. If you gave yourself a 2 or a 3, you've got some specific gaps that are absolutely addressable. And perhaps the takeaway from today is where to focus, right? Maybe you've got scan gaps. And scanning gaps in your system. That's a good takeaway from today, that you can go and focus on those scanning gaps. If you've got a 4+, it goes back to our case study, right? You're spending a tremendous amount of money in both, I would almost guarantee it, either lost orders because you don't have the inventory, or cash flow tied up in inventory you don't need. Extra human bodies working on your warehouse floor for things that should only take 2 people are taking 3 people. It's costing your business real money today, I would think, if you are a 4 or greater in our simple little diagnostic score here today. So as we wrap up, and I want to be conscious, if you've got questions, I've got some questions for Matt prepared that I think will be helpful, but if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and I think I should be able to see them. Put those questions in there. If you scored a 4 or more, we'd love to talk to you. You can see our email contact details here, myself and or Matt. Feel free to reach out to one or both of us. And if you are lost and you're like, I have no idea what our warehouse looks like, maybe that's the case. I don't know who would know. Does anybody know around here what our warehouse looks like? Then that's a whole different conversation, and we can help you get unlost and figure out actually what's happening in your warehouse today might be the place you need to start at. We have a whole audit process to help you understand what's going on in your warehouse today so that you can build a ground zero, even if it's terrible, at least you know where it's terrible and why. So if either of those categories, we'd love to talk to you about your warehouse operations and how we might be able to help you with P21. We'll be at Insights this year. If you're going to Insights, we'll be at Worldwide User Group also later in August. And you can also reach out to us immediately on our email address. Coming back to that free giveaway, if you would like that pick ticket visibility portal, picker lines and time that we evidenced earlier in the webinar, take out your phones right now and scan that little QR code, and that will take you to a web page where you can download that SRD file. So for those of you who know about portals, you will know where to find that. And Katie's also just posted the link to the that page directly in the chats there, so you can grab that link versus the QR code if that's easier for you. And if you have any questions about SRD files and portals, you can reach out to us. But for those of you who know what you're doing there is a free giveaway that will give you immediately this afternoon, if you so choose, a bit more visibility into your system. Okay, a couple of questions to wrap up here. Matt, we talked about this earlier today. How sophisticated does your setup need to be before you actually get gains? Is there a minimum level of configuration required here today? Where would you start to get the quickest gains fastest, Matt, of anything?
So one of the nice things of everything we showed everybody today is you can make it as simple or as complex as you want it. If you want to add every single little feature that you saw, yes, it may be a little bit more complexity, or maybe you say, you know what, let's just start with just data changing our screens, cleaning those up, moving things around. But the biggest thing that I could suggest to everybody is moving to that workbench. That workbench can give you full visibility of your pick tickets. You can set it up to, pull in all tickets, or like I said, you can use FedEx tickets, but it is going to be your number one tool to see what is being picked in my warehouse, what needs to be picked, how can I get it out there to them, and I'm not having to track somebody down to say, hey, can you go pick this?
And Matt, a good place to start that could be in a play system, right? Starting to mess with what a wireless workbench looks like in a play system. Would that be a good place to start for somebody if wanted something to experiment?
Absolutely. That play environment is your number one tool. Get in there, play with it, break it, see what, how can the system benefit you, and you can start even seeing it right there in action.
Okay, I'm going to ask you the dreaded data problem, Matt. If a warehouse has been running without scan compliance for years, how do you handle the data quality problem? The inventory is already dirty. Where do I start, Matt? My warehouse is bad, man. It's bad out there. I've got bad data. What should I do?
So the first thing that I always suggest to people, especially if you're coming new to WMS, start with using WMS for your receiving and your put away. That's going to go ahead and help you stop the bleeding. Let's go ahead and start making sure as things are coming in, we can get them put up. We know what's been received. We know where it's going. We can go ahead and start getting hands on, and we're not impacting our end customers. So you're not worried, okay, if it takes me an extra 20 minutes to complete this task, that's fine. I can get good at it. I can understand it. And it's going to start getting people used to using the guns. Start scanning everything. After that, do a cycle count. Make sure your inventory gets right. If you already stopped the issue of the put away, well, now you've already eliminated majority of the issues for the inventory. Go ahead and start doing cycle counts. Make sure that inventory gets right. Once you know it's there, then move into picking, because when I go to that bin, I know what's going to be in that bin. I've already taken the steps to fix everything.
Yeah, excellent advice. Start with receiving and put away. That's the relatively safe space, right? That's a really good place to start when it comes to the data quality, because I know everybody's struggling with data. That's the most common question we have globally is data quality issues, and that's a really good place to start. All right, I'm going to call it good there for today. Thank you so much for those who attended today. I can see we had great attendance. We really appreciate your time, and you know how to find us if you need us, and we'll see you either directly or at one of those upcoming events. Thanks again.